Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Get Digital. My name is Sean Donnelly. I'm a senior analyst at a company called eConsultancy. I'm based in London, but I used to work with the team at the Irish Institute of Digital Business, and I know because I've been there before, they've worked really hard to create a conference track to help businesses of all stages and of all sizes to harness digital technology to achieve their goals. It's been really great to explore topics related to business and entrepreneurship and leadership, and also kind of the art of possibility. And I'm here to introduce our final speaker of the day, who's Hannah Shields, who, among other things, is an adventurer, and her talk is titled Limits Only Exist in Our Minds. And actually, this might be a surprise to Hannah, because I was checking my email yesterday and I could see that 10 years ago, we contacted Hannah and we asked if she would be free to participate in one of our events 10 years ago, but she wasn't available then. So it's taken us 10 years to get Hannah to virtually visit DCU. So in terms of the session, you might have questions for Hannah and we'd love to get them. So you will see that you have a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen there. So please type in your questions there and then I'll compile those questions for Hannah at the end. So without further delay, I'll hand over to you, Hannah.
Thank you very much and good evening, everybody. First of all, this is a huge thing for me. This is only the third time that I've actually done a Zoom meeting. And it's the first time that I've actually been really talking in it. So I have to apologize to my ineptitude, but actually taking part in this conference has made me come out of my comfort zone and start to learn new skills. I had been hoping to do some slides, but I had no notion how to do it. So if anybody can give me lessons in that, I will be quite happy to accept it. But what I'm really doing is I'm actually just going to be talking through some of the experiences that I have. I don't set myself up to be any expert in anything because I'm still learning and I can't really give advice to people because the things that you have to go through, it's all very personal. And all I can do is talk about how I have learned to deal with things, how I've learned that buzzword resilience. In my day, it was how I learned to bounce back after huge disappointments and sicknesses. So where it all stemmed from was in 1969, showing my age here, my father and myself were looking at the TV, the lunar landings. As a family, my parents sat down, us all down in front of the TV, said, "You're watching this, this is monumental." Now I have to admit, as a 6-year-old child, I just wanted to go to my bed, to be honest. But it was the next night, whenever I was out looking up at the moon with my dad, and he just sat to me in awe and he went, "There's 2 men up there." And again, it was a huge magnitude, but the fact that my dad was so in awe of this, I went, this is very special. But it was the next thing that really made the most to me. He turned around to me and he looked down at me and he said, "You work hard, you too can do anything that you want in life." And that really stuck with me. And anybody that has authority out there and anybody in a position of responsibility, it is amazing by saying sometimes 1 or 2 little sentences can have a profound effect on people and really inspire them. And from then on, I really did believe that. I went, if I work hard, I can achieve anything. Now, I have to admit, in 2007, summiting Mount Everest was not one of the things that I really envisaged at all. And I think if you had told sort of the 6-year-old me or the 11-year-old me, I would have just looked at you and went, "Nah, that's not me." But whenever I was 10 years old, I remember seeing, I'd always been fascinated by the moon, but I remember seeing a painting. It was a picture of a full moon, winter trees, and at the very bottom of it was the line, "Limits exist only in our minds." And obviously I was a very intense child, but I knew I wanted that poster because what I got from that at that time was that the only person that was going to limit me from doing anything was going to be me. And I remember turning around to my mum, and she was really quite aghast because all my other sisters and brothers, there were 7 in the family, they were all asking to buy either a packet of chips or some sweets or something. And there I was asking for money to buy this poster. But my mum gave it to me. And I went and bought my poster, and that poster came everywhere with me. And even in my days of doubt, I would just continually look at it and go, yes, the only thing that's going to stop me from doing anything is going to be me. So if things were not going my way, I would go, it's me that has to deal with this. It's me that has to think my way out of this, again, with the help of others. I went to university in Manchester and studied dentistry. And again, thought at that stage, at 22 years old, I had a clear plan of what I wanted to do. I actually was going to get married, think I had a lot of children, and go into practice with my husband. And my fiance, I should say. One of my consultants in the hospital turned around to me. He was a surgeon, again, somebody that I admired greatly. He turned around to me and he said, I think you would make a great surgeon. And he said, and I think that you would have an amazing life with it. Now, again, it was not on my agenda at all. But because there was somebody in authority that I really believed in and admired, and whenever he said he thought I could do this, he saw something in me that I obviously didn't see in myself, that potential. And I just went, well, why not? If he thinks I'm capable of doing it, then I must be. So I applied off for my first job in surgery, completely out of my comfort zone. I had been trained to pull teeth and to fill teeth and to make false teeth. I was not dealt, I wasn't given the education at that stage to deal with people who had cancer, who had their faces literally torn to shreds in accidents. And there I was, throwing myself in at the deep end. And the one thing that I always knew was that it was important for me to ask questions. As far as I was concerned, there was never any stupid question that I asked, because if I asked it, it was something I didn't know, no matter how trivial it may seem to others. If I didn't know it, you ask. And I went to my consultants and I went, I'm out of my depth. Please help me, sort of guide me, tell me what to do. And one very good consultant, he turned around and he said, you're human, you will make mistakes. He says, because we all do. He said, but the only thing I ask of you is that if you make a mistake, you learn from it and you don't do it again. So I found myself in my first job in surgery and I absolutely adored it. So from starting off getting qualified in one direction, I turned a completely opposite, 180 degrees in the opposite direction. And I realized that that's what I wanted to do. Again, I thought I had a very clear plan. I worked in surgical units all over England, getting experience up, just broadening all my education. And again, always going into jobs that I knew were slightly out of my sphere, as they would say, but because I wanted to push myself, I wanted to learn. So I knew I constantly had to always get myself out of my comfort zone. I was back doing medicine, because as a surgeon, you have to be doubly qualified as a doctor and dentist. And unfortunately, I got multiple organ failure whenever I was 27 years old. Nobody knew why. I was in hospital for on and off for 6 months. And I was a very strong person. I was one of these people I can deal with this, and also at that time, this was quite a number of years ago, nobody talked about mental health. It was one of those things you hushed up and you just went kind of get on with it. And there was one time that I discharged myself, very good patient that I was, from hospital. I think this was the 3rd or 4th time I'd been in hospital, and I went home and everybody kept asking me, how are you? And I had this fixed grin on my face going, I'm fine, I'm fine. Until I went home that particular time, and my younger brother had to clean me whenever I came out of the toilet. And I remember going to bed that night going, if this is what my life is going to be, I don't want to live this anymore. And that was a huge shock. I felt as if I'd almost given myself a big slap in the face, because I'd been lying to everybody else, but most importantly, I'd been lying to myself that I certainly was not coping with the illness that I had. And that really was, it was such a shock for me that I from then on, I always, one of the things I learned from that was that I have to be honest with myself, how I'm feeling physically and mentally. Because at that time I was getting loads of help from all the doctors for all the physical ailments that I had. But I certainly wasn't asking for any help because, again, it wasn't something that was talked about easily. So I went down the next day, and I remember just opening up to my family and just bawling and saying, I'm not coping, I'm not fine. And I have to admit, they all just looked at me and went, they just hugged me and kissed me, and they went, well, we knew that you weren't coping, but you know, sort of, we couldn't say that to you because you had to admit it to yourself. And so from then on in, and sort of, I always realized that I had to look after myself, both physically and mentally. Now, again, after about 6 months, and I was on the road to recovery again, and I knew that I didn't want to do medicine again, but I really wasn't quite sure what my plan was in life. And I went back into general practice as a dentist because I had to earn money. There was practicality there. And I had heard then in 1992 that there was exhibitions going out to Mount Everest with the first Irish expedition, Dawson Stelfox, Frank Nugent. Now, I'd always wanted to get into Tibet, got thrown out of it twice, but I wanted legally to get into it. And I went, right, okay, I'll go as an expedition unit member. Went down, and I remember listening to Dawson talk and go, yeah, that's it. I knew in my gut instinct that I was going to go. Everybody was, and I turned around and said, but you can't, you've just, unfortunately, I still had quite major heart problems and I had long-term asthma afterwards. And they went, you can't be going anywhere. And it was my doctor that stood up for me, and he went, I think Hannah knows herself. She feels she's capable of this, then she has to go. And because I was going to go anyway, but it was very nice to have the support of everybody behind me. And I went just out as a trekker, I was nobody that was not interested in actually climbing mountains. I was interested in the history of it. I had read all the books whenever I was younger of all the explorers, and the Northwest Passage to, Shackleton and Tom Crean, again, a couple of my heroes. But again, all the books were written by men for men. Certainly there was no such thing as ladies going off to do this. But I went out, and I remember seeing Mount Everest in her entirety from the north side. And I have to say, my stomach did the biggest Irish jig you can imagine. And it scared the bejesus out of me, because I knew, I looked at that mountain and I went, oh God, that's what I'm going to do. And I knew it, got instinct. And I remember I went, well, what am I expected to do here? I'm asthmatic, I've got a heart defect, I'm just coming out of 6 months in hospital. I don't like heights, I'm not a climber. There was a lot of questions going through my head. But I went, I'm out there with the best climbers that had got together from Ireland ever in 1993. And I asked Dawson, I asked Frank, I asked all the climbers, what did they do? And I remember, they smiled at me to begin with whenever I said, I'm going to climb this mountain. But after a while, whenever they realized I was serious, they gave me tips and they gave me an advice on what I had to do. And whenever I came back, it was, right, where do I start? I knew that I couldn't really do what I wanted to do where I was. So I gave up a very good job and found myself over in Sheffield, teaching in the dental hospital over there because I knew it was the mecca for climbing. And I just started from scratch. And I'm one of these people that I think if I'm going to do something, and if there are lessons in it, you go to the experts, you get taught properly. Because if you have the basics, then that will stand you in good stead for later down the line, whenever you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, that you have that knowledge behind you. So I literally went out, started to climb, started to push myself higher, faster, further. And, I always climbed with people who were better than me, because again, that was my way of only learning to improve. was always pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And I think one of the things that was always very helpful, which is why I think I got on well with the climbing, that little lesson that my first consultant had told me. He said, if you make a mistake, you learn from it and you don't do it again. And that came in very handy whenever I was climbing, because I did make lots of mistakes. And I appreciate that the people that I was climbing with allowed me to make those mistakes. But again, always from it, learned what I didn't do so well, what I had to do to improve, and then get on with it. I remember then climbing in South America with gentleman Pat Falvey, because I had to test my lungs. That was going to be one of my limiting factors. I had been in hospital quite a few times because of asthma attacks, and I didn't know that was one of the things, the practical things that was going to inhibit me. So we were climbing in South America, and I remember Pat, Claire O'Leary and myself, he turned around to Claire and I and said, what would you like to do? And both of us turned around and said, we would like to summit Mount Everest. We would like to climb it and summit it. So I remember Pat turned around and he said, okay, Mike, if you're in for the expedition, I'll give you a call. Now, I have to admit, this was probably in 2000, sort of the year 2000. And I thought it was going to be 6-7 years down the line, because I still had a lot of skills that I knew that I needed. And all of a sudden then in 2002, Pat gave me a call and he said, we've got climbing permits for the next year. Are you in or you're out? I said, basic things, how much is it going to cost me? I'm not even going to give you a heart attack to say how much it was, but put it this way, it was more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 figure sums. And I remember having an asthma attack on the phone, and I had to put the phone back down again, and sort of sat on the phone, breathing away, getting myself calm and going, how the heck do I get this money together? Because I certainly didn't have it in my bank account. And I'm a big one for making lists. And I went, well, I need help. Who am I going to ask? And I knew my sister and 2 other friends. I got straight on the phone to them. I said, I need help in raising this money. Will you help me? I got 3 yeses from them all. 10 minutes later, I was back on the phone to Pat going, count me in. Then it was just a year of trying to get, sort of nearly 20,000 pounds together to do this expedition. And a lot of people kind of look at you in absolute, wait a minute, what kind of money? Climbing permits at that stage were about $5,000. You're looking at tents, £500 a pop. You needed a couple of those. A down suit, and one suit was about £1,500. And then you needed other jackets. You needed oxygen bottles, which were £100. You can see then how everything started to escalate in price. So I remember that whole year, all I could think about was money, 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 fundraising. And even whenever I was actually going to the airport to fly out, I'd done a fundraiser the night before. And I remember going down with about £5,000 in cash, handing it over to somebody at the airport going, I think that's me covered. The problem with that, I'd actually taken my mind off the ball and my focus off the ball of what I was actually going to be doing. I was going out there to climb, and I'd just been so concentrating on money. And I remember Claire and I sort of getting into Kathmandu. And one of the things at that time was they didn't really have an awful lot of the equipment made for ladies. We had scanned all of Europe trying to find me a pair of climbing boots, high altitude climbing boots. The only place that we could get were ones made in Switzerland, and they got flown out to Kathmandu. I remember going into the airport, collecting my box, went into the hotel that night and putting my high altitude boots on and realizing that they were too small. And I just went, oh, I just had a little cry to myself, because I went, what am I going to do? I kind of catastrophized it, going, oh, it's the end of the world. Then I had to pull myself together and I go, okay, this decision's to be made. If it has that much of effect on you, then you stop this now. If it's not, you just have to get up, suck it up and get on with it. I decided to get on with it. And then whenever we were going out and walking into base camp, at that stage there was, I think, 227 climbing permits that had been issued. and there was only 17 females. And Claire and I were walking into base camp completely and utterly intimidated by all these big, strong lads seemingly flying past us while I was coughing and spluttering on my way to base camp. Whenever I got there, I realized that I was completely getting overwhelmed with everything that was before me. And I realized that I had to break this down into manageable pieces. We have an old thing in mountaineering, a saying that I use frequently, that you can't eat an elephant all at once. You had to eat it bit by bit by bit. So I sat one of the first nights I was in base camp and I made out a list. I went, what are the things that I have to deal with? What can I do today to make me ready for tomorrow? What can I be ready for tomorrow to make me ready for a week's time? And I kept breaking everything down into manageable pieces so that I knew that I could concentrate on what I needed to do to get me through to the next phase. People a lot of the time also wondering, whenever you're way out in the mountains, what is the issue with getting into Mount Everest, climbing at altitude? If I put all of us on the summit of Mount Everest now, every single one of us would be dead in about 2.5 minutes. The big problem and the big killer is the altitude. Mount Everest is not a technical mountain. I've actually climbed harder things here in Northern Ireland and Fairhead, all the rest, but it's the altitude. What actually happens is there's so much less oxygen there up at the top than there is here at sea level. That has two effects. One thing, we're not meant to be, certainly here I am at sea level, I'm not adapted to climb at high level. So after about a month, my body will start to produce a little bit more hemoglobin whenever I'm at base camp. So you climb slowly up the mountain during the night, back down again, to literally what you call acclimatize, so that your body gets used to the lack of oxygen. Now, whenever you're at base camp, I really am not sending a big picture, a good picture of it here, because of the lack of oxygen as well and the clearness in the air, you develop what they call the Kumbu Cough, and you literally coughing all the time, and sometimes you feel as if your guts are coming up through your mouth, and that's because of the dry air, lack of oxygen. You lose all taste sensation, so you really don't feel like eating. And as you start to climb up the mountain, because of the lack of oxygen, you get thumping headaches. Again, I'm not selling, I know, a very good picture of this, but that's the reality whenever you go into high altitude. But the other big thing whenever you're at altitude is that there's different pressure up there. Here at sea level, the pressure outside is equal to inside. And so your body is in equilibrium, all is fine. As you start climbing up the high mountains, the pressure outside is actually less than in your body. So what actually happens is your body becomes under pressure and it wants to push everything out. It wants to push the fluid out to an area where there's less pressure. We have got natural airspaces in our body where that can go to. So literally we have got your lungs and you have got your brain and sinuses. The fluid gets pushed out of your body into your lungs and into your brain. And that's known as pulmonary and cerebral edema. And literally what actually happens is you start drowning in your own lungs, or your brain becomes under pressure because of the fluid buildup in it, and you make a simple mistake and that can be fatal. So those are the big killers on the mountain, and that's why it takes a long time whenever you're out to climb these high mountains. I came back and a gentleman sort of said to me, well, how long were you away for? And I went, just under 3 months. And he nearly had a heart attack himself. He went, 3 months? I thought you were away for 3 days. What took so long? It takes literally that month for your body to start producing what's known as red blood cells, so that you can make use of what little oxygen there is. And also whenever you go out in the mountains, there's no way of getting all of this stuff up. You literally have to carry it in your back, climb up. usually at night time. And the reason why you climb at night is because it's much colder. And so the ice is much more stable. So you generally start climbing at about 10 o'clock at night, reach one camp at about 7 o'clock in the morning, dump your stuff off, come all the way back down again, rest for a couple of days. Whenever you're feeling a bit okay, you literally go back up with more kit, dump it at the first camp, come all the way back down again, rest again, bring more kit up, camp one, then you move up to establish another camp, leave some more stuff there, and you come all the way back down again. So that's what takes the time whenever you're out in the mountains. You're establishing tents and campsites all the way up the mountain. And I remember, you know, sort of we as the Irish Expedition, it was fantastic. Everybody loved coming to us. We were very sociable. And that was great because we always had lots of visitors. But the problem with that on that particular expedition, somebody had brought in bugs. And there's nothing there, you know, sort of antibiotics don't work, you know, and if you get a wee cough or a cut, nothing heals because of the lack of oxygen. Again, I know I'm not selling this very well, but that's the realities of it. And we went up, somebody had come in and brought a very bad stomach bug. And by the time that we were going for a summit bed, we were all down with really bad vomiting, diarrhea. Again, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of it, but I probably had lost another stone weight at that stage because I just couldn't eat anything, couldn't keep anything down, and I was vomiting quite badly. And we'd gone up to camp 2, and I remember setting off very early compared to sort of a couple of the lads that were with me because I was feeling lousy. And through the night I was climbing, and I had decided in my head that I had had enough. And I'd come to another point where I knew that the other fellas, we could all meet up. And I had decided that I had had enough. I was going to turn around whenever the lads came up to meet me. And out of the mist in the middle of the night came this joint expedition from this Indian army and Nepalese army expedition. And they all stopped because, you know, I knew them all well. And they went, "Why are you here by yourself?" And I went, "I'm fed up. I'm going home. I've had enough." Well, I'm not joking. I got a hug and a kiss from the 10 of those gentlemen. And it was amazing. I remember my shoulders going back and my head was a wee bit high. And I went, all of a sudden, I felt a wee bit better. And as I was climbing during the day, word got back, and I don't know how, to Camp 2 that I wasn't well. And I had looked after a Canadian climber who had been trying to summit without oxygen, and he had a really bad chest infection. I'd been trying to look after him, you know, sort of, and trying to get him medically fit, helping him as much as I possibly could. He came up to me at between Camp 2 and Camp 3, which is at about 23,000 feet, which again, where a lot of the planes fly. And he took my rucksack off me and he said, "Hannah, I'm going to carry this for the next 4 or 5 hours because I want you to have the best chance of climbing and going for your goal." And that's how kind the climbers are. A lot of the climbers get bad press, but we appreciate whenever we go into these high mountains that there is no rescue. If you cannot walk and you cannot be carried off these mountains, you're left there. That may seem very harsh and hard, but you're really struggling yourself just to survive. There's absolutely no way that you can carry anybody down. In one of the ice falls, there had been a really bad avalanche, and there had been a couple of people killed. There was no bodies brought down. Again, you certainly do not bring bodies down, but there had been what they called walking wounded. There was a 30-strong team went in to help those 2 climbers come down, and that took them nearly 24 hours to do that. So if you're by yourself, you come across another climber that may still be alive, you know that there's very little that you can do for them. And we as climbers accept that. And I certainly had always said to everybody before I went in, you do not sacrifice your own lives for me. And that was the understanding that we had. And I really appreciate him for doing that, because it was only whenever I started to get higher and started to feel a bit better, I went, yeah, I can do this. And we went to the death zone, 26,000 feet, to establish our last camp. And we all made a bid for summit. There was a really bad storm that came in, and we were going up, and we were probably about 400 meters from the summit, and I literally got blown off my feet. And there was a head torch coming back down towards me, and there was a lead star. He was a Nepalese climber that had summited 6 times, and he was the first person that I met. He said, "Too dangerous, everybody off the mountain." Now, I have to admit, there was absolutely no way I was going to question his authority. I knew this man, he had summited. If he said that it wasn't safe, I turned around. There was Pat, Mick, Ger, and myself. We came back down to the 26,000 feet, the death zone. We decided that we were feeling okay, so we were going to hang around for another 24 hours. But unfortunately, we didn't have enough oxygen for this. So we were there for 24 hours with no oxygen. So I was getting very oxygen deprived. Whenever I started off climbing the next night, again, it was all at about 10 o'clock, I was already cold. About 3 hours into it, I couldn't feel my feet. I knew I had frostbite, but I didn't care. I was going on. That's how driven, how focused, how determined I was. About another 7 hours into it, I couldn't feel my hands. I literally could not feel my hands up to my elbows. I'd actually been trying to get the circulation going back into my hands, and I didn't realize that I'd hit my hand on a rock, and I'd actually broken quite a few bones in my hand. Didn't even realize that. I was still climbing on because I went, this is my only chance at this. I'm going for it. And you know, sort of, I thought I was quite logical at the time. I went, okay, I'm going to lose my fingers here as well as my toes. I won't be a dentist anymore. I will retrain to be a pharmacist. That's how focused I was to get to the summit. And this is what is called summit fever. You blindly go on without even thinking, because all you want to do is reach that summit. You don't care of the risks that you're taking. Fortunately for me, just about 100 meters from the summit, I'd made a couple of moves, you know, sort of on this rocks. I fell off them because I couldn't feel my feet, couldn't feel my hands. By the 3rd attempt, it suddenly dawned on me that I really was going to put myself at risk here of death, because I was going to get into something I couldn't get out of. And I just stood there for a moment. I went, right, that's your choice. You can still go on. But then the thoughts came in my head. I knew Ger and Mick were climbing behind me. And all of a sudden I realized if I get into trouble, I knew them. I knew that they would risk their own lives to help me. And that's whenever there was a moment of clarity, and I went, no mountain is worth this. And even though it was one of the hardest decisions I made, I turned around and I made that first step to go down, and I felt desolate. I really did. I was actually coughing quite badly on the way down and popped 3 ribs. So basically I was in a bit of a mess coming down that mountain. I had frostbitten for hands, frostbitten feet, I had 3 cracked ribs, and I was feeling sorry for myself. I came across a body, and it was a new body because we knew where they all were. And I remember bending down and seeing people climbing over this body, and they were all going down the mountain. And I don't know, for some reason, I remember just touching him, and he moaned. And I make no apologies. I went, oh, shit, he's still alive. What can I do? It was a Sherpa that had been left by his team because he just couldn't move. Now, luckily enough, I had some medication with me, and I gave it to him, and I sat with him. But I was getting colder and colder. And I'm not going to lie, the desire in me to live was overwhelming. And I actually got very angry with this man because I was sort of going, I didn't want to leave him. But I remember looking at him going, you're the reason why I'm putting myself in jeopardy in here, because I don't want to leave you. And I remember getting up, and again, I don't suggest you do this to any of your colleagues at work, but I remember I kicked him and I thumped him and I kicked him and thumped him. And I don't know whether it was the medication or whether it was the fact that I was kicking him and thumping him, but he managed to actually just come around. I got him on his feet. Now he was snowblind, so he couldn't see anything. And I short roped him and I took him down the mountain until we got to a point whenever other Sherpas were coming by and they realized that I was bringing their own Sherpa down the mountain, they came back up again to help both of us come down. Whenever I got back home, I was really quite desolate because I was a high earner, a high achiever. I was used to getting my goal. And I had to think long and hard about what I wanted to do. But whenever I look back at hindsight's a wonderful thing, I realized that I was there to gain experience, but most importantly, I was there to help somebody off the mountain. I knew I had a lot of lessons to learn, and I made a big list of what I felt I needed to do and what I did well already. I congratulated on what I'd done well, and I went, good, you've got that. You know you're okay with it. But I looked at this list of what I needed to do, and I went, there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done. Pat rang me up the next year going, fully funded expedition. Are you in or you out? And I have to admit, I was so tempted to say yes and go away. But I looked at that list that I had said of what I needed to improve. And I said, no, I'm not coming, because the next time I want to go back, I want to have every single thing ticked off so that I know in my head that I was fully prepared for it. So I said no to the expedition. But I was so proud that Claire O'Leary, my climbing compatriot and buddy, was the first lady to summit Mount Everest. Instead, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, Richard Dunwoody. He was a jump jockey. He said, Hannah, do you fancy skiing to the North Pole? These are the kind of friends I have. And I went, God, yes. Now, unfortunately, I had a couple of bits of my toes removed because of the frostbite, and my surgeon friend had said, no cold places for at least 2 years. I went, North Pole's not that cold. So I signed up for it. Mind you, that was my static caravan that was sold to go on that. Richard couldn't do it, but I ended up talking to a young lad on the phone, Chris Poltukin, and we were brutally honest with each other on the phone about our strengths and our weaknesses. And most important thing, we found that we could laugh together. So I remember getting on this plane to go to Resolute in the Canadian Arctic with a group of lads. And I remember, turning around to all them, Chris, Chris, Chris. And eventually I met my buddy, Chris, and we laughed and we talked and we laughed and we talked that whole flight over. And, we went, well, what are our priorities going to be here? Because this was a race. But we went, our priorities are to stay safe. That was one of our most important things. To finish it, that was the second priority. And to race it, if at all possible. I think one of the things in businesses you will always know, it's very important to know who your competition is. Whenever we were out there, there was a group of Marines, ex-Marines, who were Arctic warfare specialists. I remember Chris and I just laughing to ourselves and kind of going, I think that's the competition there. So because we were numpties, I'd never pulled a sleigh before. I'd never been in the Arctic. I never knew anything about it. I went, we're going to shadow these people. We're going to look, we're going to listen. We will eavesdrop on everything that they say because we had to learn fast. Anyway, we started off. And it was only be careful what you would think of. I always said whenever I was only up in the Arctic, I went, I'd love to meet polar bears. I don't know why. I think I was still influenced by all those Coca-Cola ads that you see at Christmas about these polar bears that sit and sup their Coca-Cola. Reality is harsh. Whenever you eventually meet a 1-ton polar bear and it starts diving straight at you, believe you me, they do not drink Coca-Cola, they eat you. So, again, harsh lessons in that. But what I found was that Chris and I, working together as a team, realizing that each other's strengths had to be engaged all the time, because we were very lucky. His strengths were where my weaknesses were. And we only found that out being totally honest with each other. So we literally skied. We didn't know where we were. We pulled our sleighs. 15, 16 hours a day in temperatures going down to minus 89 degrees. And all I can say is whenever you actually do feel anything, it was painful. But we finished it. And at the end up, there was only 5 of us that finished, the 3 Marines and Chris and myself. And that gave me a huge boost. I went, I'm learning now. And the Marines and the ex-SAS lads who were running it turned around at the end of that and they said, Hannah, come work with us. And I have to admit, I was a wee bit agobbed and I went, wait a minute, I'm a civilian and an Irish Catholic from Northern Ireland and a female. And they just laughed at me and went, yes, Hannah, we know. But they said, still come out and work with us. For a couple of years, I went out completely out of my comfort zone and I learned from the best. And because I took that opportunity, because it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, I ended up even going up to Norway and working with the special forces up there as a civilian and learning so much from them. I have to admit, they learned nothing from me. But at the end of all of this, I realized after about 4 years, all that little list that I had ticked off, I was ready to go back to Mount Everest. I applied off to a team that Noel Hannah had worked with, said that they were very good, sent my CV, got accepted onto the expedition, turned up at Kathmandu airport. There was my 7 Summits team. And of course I went up to them, hello, hello, hello. And they looked at me blankly and I got one hello back and that was from the team leader. And I suddenly realized the Russians, none of them spoke English. And that was really quite hard to begin with. It knocked me back. And I went, right, well, you just have to get on with it. You're not here to make friends. But one of the things that I realized that I still trusted my gut instinct. I trusted these fellas very, very quickly. And one of the other things that I realized is that actions certainly speak louder than words. I couldn't communicate with them. But, you know, sort of the actions that we took, I learned to trust these fellas. They were hardcore. They were typical Russians. They smoked and drank vodka the whole way up the mountain, and they smoked and drank vodka the whole way back down the mountains. But they were class. And we were the only team that every single one of us summited, and that hadn't happened ever before. So I was very proud to be part of that. I came back and, you know, sort of, I went, what am I going to do now? You know, sort of, because I had started clicking off all the little goals that I had achieved, but I'd only taken up running at 34 because I did my first marathon with 1 day's training. I was 34 years old. I heard about the Belfast Marathon on the Thursday. It was on the Monday. I ran 13 miles on the Friday and I went, I think I'll run the marathon on the Monday. I went out, I ran my marathon in 3 hours 45. The training club here in Derry, City of Derry Spartans, approached me, said, you've just run a marathon. In that time, I was a size 14. They were stick insects. They said, come join us. I went, no way. Because I was very self-conscious. I was a big girl. They were stick insects, all size 8. Just please come and join us. And with enthusiasm and help from them and encouragement, I joined the club. Within 2 years, I was an international vest running in European cross-country championships. Then after I came back from, you know, sort of probably in my mid-40s, somebody that I adored was killed in the mountains, and that was Ger. I found it very, very difficult to go back. I lost heart a little bit because of that, because I loved him to bits. He was my climbing buddy. But he had always laughed at me and said, I think he should make an ultra distance runner. I just thought he was trying to get rid of me, to be honest, half the time. But in like my mid-40s, I went, well, why not? I went off and I started running in the mountains instead. Very quickly realized that I was actually quite good at it and got my international vest, my Irish vest for mountain running. That was at 44. By 46, 47, again, the joints were beginning to get a bit sore and I went, what am I going to do now? And that's whenever I was working an awful lot with the military lads. At 50, I decided I needed a new little something out of my comfort zone. So I took up triathlons. Again, I swam like a brick at that stage, but sort of went wholeheartedly into it. And again, found myself doing quite well in it. But again, a lot of it came with hard work. And this was always those principles that I had learned from my father from years ago, that, sort of, if I put the work in, I could achieve anything. And one of the things I was very proud at 53 years old, I was one of the oldest ladies ever to win a national series race, sort of this in triathlon competition. And at 54, I remember being sick one night and looking at the TV, and I was watching the Blame Game, one of my favorite TV programs at this stage. And it said, sort of, if you wanted to be an audience member, get on the website. So of course, me being a numpty as I was, got onto the BBC website. Could I actually find out how they got tickets? No. But I saw at the very corner of this thing, could you be an astronaut? All the way back, my memories to 1969 and the lunar landings. I often wondered, what did it take to be an astronaut? Could I have been an astronaut? Because whenever I was growing up, the only people that were astronauts were American or Russian fighter pilots. And I remember this was at 11:30 at night. I pressed that button and I went, hell yes, I could be an astronaut. Downloaded the information. It had to be in for 12 o'clock that night. I was honest. I sent this thing in, didn't even know whether it had gone. And I just sat and I went, well, at least there was an opportunity there. I took it. You can imagine my surprise when a couple of months later, I got the phone call from the BBC going, we're very interested in you. And then going through that whole short list of the psychological and the physical assessments to get down to the last 12, and to meet Chris Hadfield, who had run the European Space Agency at that time. Again, that was a dream come true. I went through the process. I realized I really did not want to be an astronaut, because I had a bit of an issue having been buried in an avalanche with enclosed spaces. But at least I had taken that opportunity and realized that, no, that wasn't for me, but other things came out of that. So that's why I'm sort of saying to everybody that I have always gone back to the simpler things in life. Control what you can control. And the only person that control that is yourself. So I still go by the only person that can stop me from doing anything in my life is me. Sort of, if I put limits on myself, then I will limit myself. I unfortunately had a bad accident 2 years ago. Bit dramatic. I was cycling along, training for Ironman triathlon, and I didn't see a live wire that had fallen over the road at head level. I cycled into it. I hit it in the face. Well, it hit me in the face. 22,000 volts blasted me off my bicycle, and then I went smack in my head. Yeah, it was sore. That's all I can say. It was sore. But unfortunately, I had very bad repercussions from that. I had very serious head and neck injury. Had to give up my job. And I kept, the doctors kept saying to me, Hannah, this is going to be 2, 3, 4-year recovery. And I kept silently looking at them going, do you not know who I am? I've summed up Mount Everest, I skied to North Pole, I've done ultra marathons, 100-mile races, 5-day races. I'll be over this in a couple of weeks. 6 months down the line, I realized that this was going to be something that was really challenging me. And the first thing I did was, whenever I finally accepted that it was going to take that time, I asked for help psychologically, because I felt that my identity had gone a little bit. I was no longer the dentist. I was no longer the triathlete. I was no longer the mountaineer. I was somebody who was struggling to walk at that stage. So I had my psychological help, very proud that I got it, because I felt that that was something essential that I needed. I already had the answers. Sometimes you need somebody to help and guide you and nudge you in the right direction. It's still a challenging time for me. I unfortunately still have long-term injuries that I'm getting treatments for, and at least I'm walking now. I'm slowly starting to push myself. But I have got goals set for a couple of years' time that I intend to get there. There are challenges that a few people know about because I've got them engaged, and I'm one of these people, whenever I start talking about something, then I've got the plan already set. I have my plan in motion because I still have dreams. And that's the one thing I will never knock is dreams, because that's where I've always had my dreams. But I have made a couple of them goals now, and I'm now setting a plan in action to get me ready for these little goals that I've set myself. I know I'm going to have to be flexible because I know I'm going to have setbacks. A lot of people will always ask me is, how do I stay motivated? Because in this particular time, this past 2 years, it has been tough to stay motivated. And I'm sure an awful lot of you in this COVID time as well have found, how do you stay motivated? What I do is I'm a very disciplined person. I know that I have to do very specific things to keep me going, even whenever I don't feel like it. I have to do my hours rehab, strength and conditioning that my physiotherapist gets me to do every single day. Believe you me, there's many days that I don't want to get out and do this. There's many a day I've got stumping migraines, which is one of the effects that I have because of the accident, that I really struggle to get out of my bed. But when I can, I am disciplined, I come down, I do my rehab. Then that gives me happiness. I get a wee bit of a buzz out of it that I've achieved it, even though if I can't sometimes do 100% of it, even if I do some of it, I've done that. That makes me happy. That motivates me to keep trying to improve the next time. Let's do a little bit more. Again, I get the setbacks. Whenever I get the setbacks, I go, okay, it is what it is. I don't beat myself up about it because I go, this is where I'm starting from again. Let's move on. That little bit like the elephant. Can't eat it all at once, bit by bit by bit. I'm still a work in progress. And again, all I can say to you, I don't have all the answers because I'm still learning myself. But I hope you get from this that always have your dreams. Those are the most important things. But make them a reality. And the only way that you can do that is make a goal of it. Make a clear plan. Be flexible because you have to adapt. Believe you me, I have learned to adapt. You will have multiple setbacks. But the only thing, if it is something that you are passionate about, that's one of the best motivating factors to keep you going to reach that goal. Sort of learn, take opportunities, because the only way that I've ended up in all of these exciting things, and I still have to pinch myself that I've done some of these things, is because I've taken opportunities whenever they've come. I have been more than prepared all these times to put myself out of my comfort zone, because that's the only way that I have learned and then been able to engage and push forward and learn so many new skills. Like one of the things I have on my CV, I'm an expert in polar bears. I teach people. I have been flown out to the Arctic multiple occasions to teach people how to survive attacks from polar bears, because I've had so many of them. And the reason why I've had so many of them is because I've always sprayed myself with perfume whenever out in the expedition, and we didn't realise that the polar bears were so attracted to the perfume. But that's something that you learn. That's something that I've learned. But listen, I know that there has to be some questions in there, so please feel free to ask me anything. I'm just, hopefully you will find something useful in what I've just been gibbering on about. Thank you. Thanks.
Hannah, that was incredible. Thanks for sharing your story and your honesty and your enthusiasm and your humility. I'm actually a big fan of Chris Hadfield as well. I got to hear him speaking once, and he said something like, he said, I wasn't destined to be an astronaut. I had to turn myself into one. And then he talked about how like that it was a 20 or 30-year journey to do that. And it sounds, you're very much still on your journey, which is incredible. There are some questions in here from people. We've got, there's a great one. Do you have a mantra that you tell yourself, when you feel challenged?
Yes, absolutely. My mantra is, I can and I will. And that, believe you me, whenever you're in the high altitude mountains, the last 1 kilometer, I remember I took a photograph of me in one of the ridges. And now if you asked me to run a kilometer, well, whenever I was running about a year or so ago, 2 years ago, I would have been clicking out a kilometer in about 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Whenever we were doing that kilometer, we were the fastest moving team. And it took me 7 hours to do that kilometer. With every step I took, I literally had to do about 5 or 6 deep breaths to try and get the oxygen in. And then another step, another 5 or 6 big deep breaths, and another step. And with each step I took, my little mantra always in there was, I can and I will.
Great. There are 3 questions here that sort of almost sort of relate back to this, I can and I will. We've got, do you ever feel like you need to limit your goals or follow a more singular life direction because of how maybe close family and friends perceive you or speak to you, and how do you overcome that?
I think one of the things that I realized, there's not much point in lying to people, and there's not much point in lying to myself. I think it's you have to be true to yourself, because if you try to live your life for somebody else, you will not go about it in the full 100% way. Whereas if you're living your life to what you feel is in your gut and what you feel passionate about, that's what this is only one life. We only get one shot at this. So I fully, particularly whenever I had that multiple organ failure, that was the thing that really shook me. And I went, I am only getting one life, because before that I was kind of, yes, trying to do a lot of things to please other people. And yes, I was happy enough about it. But whenever I realized that I was that close to death, I went, no, I'm going to live. I'm going to start living my life now on my terms, the way that I want to live it. Because if I'm true to myself, then I will be true to other people. And sort of, they have to accept me the way that I am. And I'm very privileged that my friends and my partners have all accepted me the way that I am. Frustrating at times for them, but sort of, I can't pretend to be somebody I'm not.
Yeah. I'm conscious, so it's 1:06. If you're happy to take a couple more questions.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, great, because the questions are flying in here. Like, you've really inspired people here.
Oh, good. Thank you.
There's an interesting question here about ambition, balancing ambition and self-belief, and that idea of what we are capable of achieving. So somebody says, ambition is great and self-belief is great, but capability can dictate what's possible, perhaps. And so this person asks, how do we reconcile that sort of passion and ambition with the harsh reality?
I think one of the things that certainly for me, I was an ambitious person. Like, I mean, I played sports at university and all the rest in there, but I didn't have any big game plan. I thought, and I was really quite happy that whenever I was qualifying to come out and a plan in my life. But this is where I think that some people, if they're in authority or if you're leading a team, if it takes sometimes somebody saying something to you, and that, first of all, my parents, always said to us, you do what you have to do in life to be happy. And you know, sort of, I always believed in that. And again, hard work. I believed if I work hard enough about something, particularly if I was passionate about it, that I will achieve it, even though it might take 2 or 3 attempts. But I think certainly in that first one, whenever that consultant turned around to me and said, I think you would make a good surgeon, that really, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I'm extremely thankful to him for that. Because of that, I went, you know, I have to, if I think of something and I put the hard work in, then I can believe that I am capable. And I honestly do believe that I am capable of doing most things that realistically I can set my cap to. But again, self-belief comes with hard work, because the more you work at it, the more you make those mistakes, the more you learn from it, then that gives you that. And also pitching yourself up against others. I always did my homework whenever I was doing anything, any races. Who are the favorites? What's their strengths? What their weaknesses? What do they do? Okay, if this is, they're doing this, then I'm going to have to up my game to make myself comparable to them. So I think for me, it was always hard work, making mistakes, you know, like sort of, and learning from those mistakes. That gave me the belief that I could do the things, and that's what made me then more ambitious, because I still have to pinch, I'm not lying when I say I still have to pinch myself some of the things, because if I'd said to my 11-year-old self that I was going to be doing this, I would have been laughing.
I'm a big fan of the growth mindset, the idea of the growth mindset. And there's something that the lady that wrote that book, I think is Carol Duckworth, if I have her name right, or Angela Duckworth. And she said, she talks about potential, and she says you can only, actually she says your potential is unknowable. And all you can ever do is pursue your potential, because you'll never actually get there. And yeah, once we decide to say, no, this is my potential, then we just limit ourselves
Yes,
so much.
totally.
You talked about hard work there, and there's 2 questions that I think are quite related. I think it's worth acknowledging the person who says, I'm just teary here from listening to your extraordinary journey, Hannah. And I'd say there's probably a few people are. And she asked, and this person asked a question, and another person asked a question. She says, can you discuss goal setting more? And how do you check in with yourself to see how you're doing with that? And then somebody else, maybe the other side of that question, is discipline. They've observed that discipline is a key theme here. And can you teach yourself discipline?
Yes, you can teach yourself discipline. And I think the discipline comes with, we'll start with, you know, sort of a dream. I'm a big one. I have dreams. I still have dreams that I want to chase. But imminently, I know in the next couple of years, there's 2 of them that I feel that I can make goals. You know, like that's what I've given myself, a 2-year timescale for a couple of these goals. Now, already, again, this is me and my lists, within those 2-year breakdown, potentially, I've given that 2 years break, I've broken it into things all the way along, smaller, manageable things, little tests that I can do all the way along to see how I'm progressing towards this goal. Again, I always realize one of the things that I'm very happy to be and very comfortable is being flexible, because again, that time scale, I can be flexible with that. The time scale of, you know, sort of how some of these little mini goals are set up, you know, sort of whether some of them could take longer, others could take shorter, you know, sort of, and then within those tiny little, like I've already set up for the next month, or for every month for the next 2 years, tiny little goals that I have set myself to raise those 2 big ones. And then within that month, I've got disciplined little areas that I know I have to be disciplined every single day, clear, concise, what I have to do to get me to achieve that first month goal. And then the little bit that I need to do the next one. And again, if you make it quite clear, it's written down, you know that needs to be done. That's where the discipline comes in. If it was vague and it was all airy-fairy, then I don't think I would have the discipline to do it. But I'm a big one for writing lists, and God, people will be thinking that I'm mad. But I've already got for the next month, sort of things that I have to do. And I will be disciplined that I will do that, and I will follow that road to take me. And I do think that that is where you can learn discipline, because it's clear, it's manageable. So I know I can do it. And again, sometimes I will have to compromise and sort of take little tangents around it. But that's the way that I work at it. I like it to be quite clear steps that I've got that I discipline, and I will do it. And that's then will keep me motivated to keep me going along in the testing times. I don't know whether that's any clearer to you, but I hope it is.
I think that's a great answer. And actually, if I'm allowed to say it, my wife is really good at sort of breaking things down and writing lists and everything. And I know I'm meant to say this, but she's not actually within earshot, but she's like just the best person that I know.
Excellent.
Yeah. Anyway, there are two last questions, Hannah. One of them is somebody asked about sort of medical sort of challenges, and I guess it sounds like you've had those challenges for a long time, not just recently. And they're saying, have they made you more determined to overcome challenges in your life?
Absolutely, absolutely, because again, at 27, I thought I had my clear plan. I was going back to medical school to be doubly qualified, and to have that multiple organ failure, and then to have, unfortunately, I still have my sort of heart defect and asthmatic. And sort of, this is the one thing, and I've been ventilated a couple of times because of my asthma. So it's not good, but I have learned to manage it against, and I personally love going back to all my consultants whenever they just kind of raise their eyes and look in despair at me and going, well, what are you planning next, and what are you doing next? Because I'm here, I'm alive, and I feel that, as you say, that I still don't feel that I've reached my full potential. And I'm just enjoying taking the opportunities whenever they come. I don't know where the next X number of years, if opportunities come up, I will grab them with both hands, and God knows where I will end up. And sharing again the stage with Chris Hadfield, which was one of my big things that I was very proud of. So I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm determined to make the most of my life for me, and hopefully for the people who are around me, because it's wonderful seeing my loved ones share in the trauma that I put them through, but also in the success whenever it comes. That's lovely. And inspiring others, because I don't want age, I don't want sex to be a sort of a barrier to anything. I started my running at 34. I started my mountaineering whenever I was in my mid-30s. I started my ultra distance running in my mid-40s, my triathlons at 50. Age is no barrier if you choose to be passionate about it and go for it. And that's what I want to see people doing. Don't be scared. Just take that first wee step out of your comfort zone. And I bet you will be amazed at what you can accomplish.
Thanks, Hannah. There's one other question here, which I think you've kind of answered along the way, but I don't know, the person who asked the question, I don't know what their situation is. So I'd like to respect them, the question that they've asked. And basically they say, taking ourselves outside of our comfort zone is something that seems to be generally recommended for personal and professional growth. But is there a limit to how much the human psyche can take being put into these kind of situations? Is there any kind of negative cumulative or compound effect for sort of constantly challenging ourselves and putting ourselves through stressful situations? And they'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, and absolutely. And this is one of the things this is where, whenever I decided to put myself out of the comfort zone, you remember I said right from earlier on, I went back to the professionals and I got lessons. Because if I'd been thrown straight out into the Arctic without any of my climbing experience, I've seen clients do it. I have seen them going into what we call Arctic shock, where all of a sudden they come out from, sort of very comfortable, sort of place, England, France, wherever it happens to be. They come out into the cold Arctic and we're trying to teach them how to go into this wilderness. And I can absolutely and utterly see that was too big a step for them. And this is where my training, my opportunities come. I take it bit by bit by bit. I push it always with people who push me that little bit, so that I'm not, I don't want to be scared witless about these things. I want to have the skills that I feel comfortable with learning. But sort of, again, it's a very measured, sort of pushing myself out of my comfort zone all the time. I certainly wouldn't go and do anything completely reckless. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. Anything that I've done and any of those presses, a lot of it has been a very gradual and sort of learning process and going to the people to teach me. I've always been very willing to take advice and learn from people. And I think that's why I was able to, even though, sort of, I find myself in, particularly whenever I went up into the Arctic, very dramatic, sort of change in circumstances. I'd never pulled a pulk behind me, which is where you pull all your stuff. But because I had had the experience in the cold, I had had the experience of being isolated for months on end, that there wasn't too many huge steps that could have pushed me over the edge. And I absolutely take that on board, because I have seen that happen to other people who took too great a step. And so the one thing that I would always say is, take it, yes, get yourself out of that comfort zone. But Meg, you don't want to be absolutely something that terrifies you, that makes you extremely uncomfortable, and that traumatizes you. It has to be done in a very measured way, which is what I try to do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Hannah. Yeah, we've done loads of questions and it's 6:15. So
oh God,
we'll let you go and have your dinner.
Oh no, I'm quite happy. Listen, I'm not seeing anybody at the moment. So even the fact that I'm looking at myself, oh God, I'm looking at myself in this, like the fact that there's people out there that I'm communicating with. This is COVID times. I'm just delighted to be in the presence of people. It's wonderful, because I missed contact. I've missed being able to talk to people. This has been a difficult time. And particularly, I don't know about anybody else, but from Christmas onwards, I did find it tough there for a while. And so, I've got a very close group of friends that allowed me to, sort of just get on the phone to them and, sort of get rid of any frustrations. They didn't judge me. They just sat and listened to me. And that's what I need. I've got, again, a couple of close friends that I trust implicitly.
And it's so important to maintain those relationships with our friends, isn't it? To reach out to them. People that can, people that can see you. So it doesn't matter what's going on or whatever, that they can really see into you. You don't need to explain yourself, and they can be there for you. Yeah. I think you've touched a little. While you can't see anybody here, the messages are popping in here from people saying this is wonderful, saying it's amazing. Thank you so much. You can't see them, but you have touched them today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, you're inspirational. Thanks for sharing your stories. And actually, a few people have said here, Hannah, please write your book. I'm sure you've heard that one before.
Do you know, I'm doing this for me and the ones that, again, I've had my climbing buddies that have been killed, and I think this is why I want to, sort of make sure that I live my life to the full, because there's other people who haven't been as fortunate. So, and also I love it. I love embracing life. I love, and like, again, it's been a tough couple of years, but no, I'm passionate. I want to go out there and I want to just embrace life again and live. I think that's the one I just want to live.
Okay, in terms of having that opportunity to embrace life again, somebody has asked a very honest question, and they've said that they're finding coming to the end of COVID quite daunting because we've kind of gotten used to being stuck at home, and so like everything has changed. And do you have any advice for sort of stepping back into the world again?
You know what, I'm so glad that somebody else has struggled with that, because believe it or not, about 3 weeks ago, it was only the second Zoom that I was doing. And I actually found the first one I was listening more. The second one, I found it actually quite difficult because I was so used to monosyllabic answers or not talking to people. The art of conversation, I actually struggled with that. And I sort of go, me? I struggled with conversation. Because I just wasn't used to it. And I realized that, and I sort of went, then I started getting on the phone to my friends going, talk to me. And then we laughed and we went, well, what do we have to talk about? Sweet Fanny Adams, as we said, there's sweet nothing to talk about. But you know, I went, I have to get used to that, just talking to people. And I find whenever I'm out even walking, like sort of walking on paths, if people get too close to me, I'm kind of a wee bit, and I went, okay, and like, I'm going to have to start getting used to it. And I will do that with my family and friends, first of all. I think that's one of the important things. Getting, you know, like sort of with my friends, my family's insane anyway, but getting out and just being in close proximity with them. I'm a big hugger. Oh God bless anybody that gets close to me, because they're going to get hugged. That's the first thing that's going to be happening. Mask on, of course, mask on. But I find it daunting. And so this is what I'm trying to do to help me get back into this, you know, sort of meeting my family, talking to people on the phone, you know, sort of now going out and meeting people outside, and just, you know, sort of getting around people again and doing it slowly with small little groups, which is what we're allowed anyway. But, you know, sort of, and building it up slowly for what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I think, you know what, we're all giving you a virtual hug now. Thanks very much for your time, and thank you for shining your light for today. We needed it.
No, thank you. Thanks for all the poor people that had to listen to me.
Grant, we'll close it up. For anyone who's attending tomorrow, GETDigital will be back with our next session tomorrow. I think it's at 9:15. That's with Ronan Dalton. He's a chief architect and CTO at IBM Ireland. So final thanks again to Hannah. If it's not too pithy, I'll show you. Probably like a lot of people, I've took loads of notes, so certainly inspired. And if it's not too pithy to share a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, not that I've read loads of his work or anything, I just like his quote, but he says, most people take the limits of their vision to be the limits of the world. A few don't. Join them. So I think let's join Hannah in not setting limits for ourselves and getting out there and shining our light. Anna, thanks very much for your time.
Good luck, and thank you. And listen, good luck to everybody. But one of the things I would say, just parting the word, we're all very good at looking after ourselves physically. Make sure you look after yourself mentally. That's the parting word. Look after yourself mentally, because it's been a tough time.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.